I'm Nick Robert Gallo, a lifelong hockey guy. I coached and scouted some of the best young hockey players in North America over the past 10 years. These days, I live my best life as a big-mouth, diehard LA Kings fan. Welcome to Holding Court. Holding Court is brought to you by Gallo Real Estate. Buying or selling a home in Southern California? It would be my pleasure helping you in your next real estate endeavor.
What's up, guys? Welcome to another Holding Court video. For this one, I wanted to do something specifically for Kings fans. I'm going to take you guys, we're going to go down memory lane a little bit here, and some of this is going to be painful. This video is 10 LA Kings prospects that should have been stars. Now, I want to make a distinction here. This is not a draft busts video. This isn't 10 guys who were picked way higher than they should have been and then, never panned out.
With the fourth pick in the 2007 entry draft, we select Thomas Hickey from the Seattle Thunderbirds. Off the board they go.
These are 10 guys who specifically were outstanding hockey players, and for a myriad, I don't know the fucking word, who cares? For whatever reasons, all these guys have different reasons, they just never panned out. Some of them just never got the opportunity. So we're going all the way back to 1995. That was the year I started watching hockey. I was 7. That's the year I fell in love with the Kings. And, falling in love with the Kings, I also got to know their prospects and some of the guys who weren't officially on the team who were coming up in the ranks. Donald McLean. Donald McLean had a ton of skill. He was a really good forward. I remember going to the early Frozen Furies where the Kings would have a lot of their prospects playing, kind of auditioning. And I remember Donald McLean balling out once or twice at Frozen Fury and just thinking this guy's going to be a stud. He went on to become a superstar in the second best hockey league in the world, the American Hockey League. In the AHL, he would go on to win a most points in a season trophy, most goals in a season trophy, and he was the league MVP. So he was an absolute stud in the AHL and just never really had a ton of opportunity. He played a little bit with the Kings. He played a little bit with the Arizona Coyotes. He only got 41 games in the NHL. The next guy, also from 1995, Pavel Rosa. His last 2 years in Major Junior, Pavel Rosa put up 100-point seasons back-to-back. That's that next level. That means you are an elite scorer if you're putting up 100 points. He did it back-to-back. So there was some expectations with Pavel Rosa. Pavel Rosa was in the Kings system from 1995 to 2004. Now, you're going to see in this list some guys who the organization gave up on. And in this instance, there's one thing for sure. Pavel Rosa never gave up on the LA Kings. This guy was willing to stay in the farm system for fucking almost 10 years.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again.
And the thing is, he stayed in the farm system, but he kicked ass and he produced. He had a lot of big seasons. In the 2003-2004 season, Pavel Rosa put up 88 points in the AHL. That was the league best. As far as Rosa's NHL looks, he only got in 36 NHL games, all with the Kings. And he did pretty well. He put up 18 points. That's respectable. But I remember whenever Pavel Rosa would get called up and play, he would look really good, and he would score, and he would produce, and he just never stuck. And that could be one where you look at the organization like, hey, you guys might have let a big-time player slip through your fingers there. There's a few guys on this list I feel like the organization just simply overlooked. They just didn't give them the time, they didn't give them the resources, and just kind of let them go. We got two kind of sad ones in a row here. Patrick OSullivan. Patrick OSullivan was one of the most talented players in his draft year. What ended up happening was the word had gotten around that he had kind of a crazy father, an abusive, one of those like kind of stereotypical abusive athlete parents. They would get into fist fights, and it was absolutely bonkers. Patrick OSullivan actually has a really good sad book about it, but it was a big ordeal, and it really fucked with Patrick OSullivan's draft status, as he should have went a lot higher in the draft, but he had this kind of, to no fault of his own, baggage, and it kind of spooked some teams. Moving on from there, Patrick O'Sullivan played his first year in the American Hockey League with the Houston Astros. Was it the Arrows or Astros? I don't even remember. He absolutely lit the league on fire. The guy put up 47 goals and 93 points in the American Hockey League. That's not Major Junior. That's the second best league on the planet. Rookies don't come into the AHL and just do that. He easily won Rookie of the Year that year. From there, he graduated to the LA Kings, and he got some good time there. He was one of a few other young players. It was kind of a rebuild. And although O'Sullivan had a pretty good amount of flashes of just brilliance out there, and he did pretty well, he never ended up tapping into that level of star power. And it's kind of hard not to blame the off-ice stuff. He played over 300 NHL games, which is very respectable. He was a decent player. He put up some points, but he never turned into the star player that so many people saw that he was capable of. So on to the second kind of sad one in a row. We have Jack motherfucking Johnson. Jack Johnson was probably the most hyped hockey prospect I've ever seen. He went third overall. After the draft, his status just continued to just skyrocket. He had a lot of viral clips when he was playing at the University of Michigan where he's taking these just crazy slap shots and knocking goalies' helmets off and shit. And of course, this was even before meme culture was big, but there was all kinds of Jack Johnson memes of him, slap-shotting asteroids into space and shit. He was just so insanely hyped. And then the Kings made the trade for him. And I'll never forget when Jack Johnson made his NHL debut, because I was actually in the hospital for a lung collapse. I was working at the Pasadena ice hockey rink at the time, and just randomly my lung collapsed, and I was in the hospital for 8 days. And I remember Jack Johnson was making his debut, and I'm like, hell no, I'm not missing this. So I had them put it on in my hospital room, and I was watching Jack Johnson. I think I watched his first 2 or 3 games from the hospital bed. So that's kind of the hype that was around Jack Johnson. It was like, I cannot miss this. He would spend some time with the Kings, and it looked like he was carving out kind of a decent career for himself, but it kind of left you waiting to see that Jack motherfucking Johnson from Michigan that's busting goalies' heads with slap shots and shit. And it just seemed like he wasn't getting there. He moved around a bit in the NHL, and unfortunately he was in the news some years back. His parents had spent his money and kind of left him in all this debt, and it was this really awful situation. This was at the time where Jack Johnson's kind of, star was sort of falling. I'm glad to see he's still in the NHL, and I've watched him a little bit this year with that awesome team in Colorado, and he's looked really good. So I'm happy to see that. With that said, I think he does make this list because although he's played over 1,000 NHL games and had a very good, respectable career, he never became that star player. So here's a fun one the old school Kings fans will remember. Bud Holloway. Bud Holloway was kind of your regular, decent NHL prospect, and as most Kings prospects do, he spent some time in the American Hockey League getting some experience at the pro level. Holloway would end up being a very good AHL player and continuing to impress there. And this was during a time where the Kings kind of sucked. A lot of Kings fans were calling for Bud Holloway for a long time. The word around town was that Holloway basically left an ultimatum for Kings GM Dean Lombardi saying, hey, I'm either going to play with the Kings or I'm going overseas to Europe. I'm not playing in the minors anymore. And usually in sports, when you leave kind of these old school guys with ultimatums like that, your ass is probably out the door. And Holloway's ass was in fact out the door. So Bud Holloway would go over to Sweden, where he quickly became his team's best player and became this huge fan favorite. So once again, the Kings fans were kind of sitting there like, what the hell are we doing? We got this guy who's a star player over in Sweden, and our team sucks. So in kind of a weird twist, Holloway would spend some time in Europe. He would do really well over there, and then he would actually eventually come back over, where he would play one NHL game with the Montreal Canadiens, and then he went back to the AHL again. It's kind of a strange one there. If I'm a GM, I'm practically never taking a goaltender in the first round, especially the first half of the first round. I'm just scared off by that. There have been way too many draft busts at goaltender. So the Kings kind of went out on a limb here and took Jonathan Bernier, 11th overall in the 2006 NHL draft. This is when Dean Lombardi was fresh taking over the Kings, and he wanted to build the team from the back out. And he took Jonathan Bernier, who at that time, Jonathan Bernier was an outstanding goalie in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. While I am anti-drafting a goalie that high, I get it with Bernier because his technical ability was just unmatched. It was so good. He just looked like a goalie coach's fantasy. He did everything right. And he was absolutely crushing in Major Junior. Where the problem started with Bernier was when the Kings were atrocious. They were awful. And they actually brought him up. I believe he was only 19 years old. And they brought him up way too early. And they put him in net, and he just got barraged. I was at one of Bernier's first games when he played against the St. Louis Blues, and the Kings defense was running around like chickens with their heads cut off, just clueless. And poor Bernier is in net, just rebound after rebound, just having to do crazy shit. And it was a bad look. And eventually the Kings kind of figured that out. They let him catch his breath in the AHL, where he would go on to win the most valuable goaltender award in the AHL. And while Bernier was drafted to be the franchise goaltender of the Kings, this was the guy the Kings were planning on having in net for 10 years. This was going to be their guy. There was a little problem in that plan, and that problem was called Jonathan Quick. Quick basically came up, played his ass off, and just beat Jonathan Bernier out. And so the Kings eventually traded Bernier, and he went on to spend some time with several teams. He's still in the NHL today. The guy's played over 400 NHL games, so you can't be mad at him for that. That is a solid career. But with that said, drafted at 11th overall to be a franchise goaltender. And to this day, he's only had 9 playoff games under his belt in the NHL. It's safe to say Bernier did not live up to that hype. So now we're getting a little bit more in the recent years here. Callie, what are you doing? That sounds like a wet fart. That sounds like a wet fart. That doesn't sound like you're snoring. Tubert's a little bit of a stretch to say he should have been a star. I would make the case, though, that he should have been a regular, long career NHLer. I watched a lot of Colton Tubert Jr., and I remember going into his draft year, there was talk about him going as high as number 1 overall in the whole draft, because scouts love the fact that he was a big kid and he was absolutely nasty. He was such a physical, rough defenseman. He even hurt his own teammate in the, I believe it was the Team Canada World Junior Evaluation Camp. And it was Jordan Caron, a Boston Bruins prospect, coming through the middle, and Tubert just fucking flattened him.
Hopeful Jordan Caron is expected to miss 6 to 8 weeks with a broken collarbone after taking a thunderous hit from Colton Tubert in the game on Saturday.
I was trying to look for him after the game yesterday, but I haven't even seen him around the rink, so I don't know if he's...
Dead.
You don't get a lot of players, that old school type like Tubert, too often. So when they come around, the scouts love it. And on top of that, Tubert's offensive ability was starting to kind of flourish in junior. There was talk of him being the number 1 overall pick in the whole draft. So by the time the draft rolled around and pick number 13 was up, Tubert was still on the board. And I believe the Kings traded up to select him. Their kind of thinking is, holy shit, Tubert's still here. He's a great player. This is a great prospect. We got to take this shot here. There were a lot of Chris Pronger comparisons with Colton Tubert. He was big, he was extremely physical, he was tough, and he could play. Tubert got a little bit of time in the minors, but he wasn't really blowing anyone away. When you go up to the pro level, the game gets so much faster and so much more skilled, and it just seemed like Tubert was having a tough time speed-wise adjusting. You know, he was playing that rugged game and he was getting into scraps. This was a guy who, in Major Junior, leading up to the draft, was the man amongst boys out there. And now that he was playing pro, that kind of being able to kind of dummy other guys out there kind of went away for him. So he didn't really have that anymore. The Kings would move on from Tubert. They traded him to Edmonton, where he once again was having a tough time separating himself from the pack, and he would only see 24 NHL games. Tubert finished the last part of his career in Germany, where he kind of became this fan favorite, steady, stay-at-home defenseman. But yeah, Tubert, I wouldn't exactly say should have been a star, but with that guy's skill set and how dominant he was in Major Junior, I definitely would have put money that he was going to play a long NHL career. Here's a damn good one. Justin Azevedo. In Justin Azevedo's draft year, he put up 124 points in the OHL. That was the most in all of Major Junior Hockey, the three big leagues put together. He outscored Steven Stamkos, for example, who would become the #1 overall pick in the draft. The Kings drafted him in the 6th round, kind of a crazy value pick, right? It's like when you go to Best Buy and you're in the dollar bin and there's a Goodfellas Blu-ray. You're like, how the fuck did this get here? The knock on him was that he's a really small guy and he wasn't that fast, so a lot of the scouts figured he was going to have a tough time in the NHL. But what sucks is he never even got a shot. I mean, he never even got a look. He crushed in Major Junior. He crushed in the American Hockey League. So this was kind of one of those guys who kind of gets written off before he even gets a chance. To this day, I mean, I guess it's not too late, but to this day, Azevedo hasn't played a single NHL game. He eventually would go over to the KHL in Russia, arguably the world's second best hockey league. He would lead his team Akbars in scoring for 2 straight seasons and has managed to carve out a very good KHL career for himself. He bounced around a little bit in Europe and just been really good. So that's one of those weird ones. It's a guy who's so talented and had a lot of success but just never gotten an opportunity. Patrick Bartosak, we're back to the sad ones. So in 2013, Patrick Bartosak won the award for Most Valuable Goaltender in all of the Canadian Hockey League. So that's all 3 Major Junior leagues. He would be drafted by the Kings, where he would play a couple seasons in Manchester, their minor league affiliate, and look really, really good and really promising. So while Bartosak was balling out in the American Hockey League, 2015 he got wrapped up with assault charges from his girlfriend at the time. Keep in mind, this wasn't that long after the whole Slava Voinov incident. So in one fell swoop, Bartosak just kind of killed all chances of him becoming an NHL goaltender, at least for the Kings. To this day, he still hasn't played a single game in the NHL. He has bounced around a bit in Europe, where he's been pretty damn good. As good as Bartosak has been in Europe in the past several years, I just don't think that too many NHL teams are going to be calling him. It is what it is. I would like to know your feedback. What LA Kings prospects do you feel like should have been stars and kind of you still can't believe weren't it? Thank you guys again for tuning in. I'll see you on the next one.